members and the moderator, and then we can start this discussion, right? So here we have Amitabh. So Mr. Amitabh is the co-founder and CEO of AltiGreen Propulsion Labs. It's one of the largest three-wheeler cargo vehicle manufacturer companies in India, and it has received awards from several reputed organizations and has raised 48.8 million in funding from Reliance Six Sense Ventures and many other VCs. And we have Kartikey. Kartikey is the founder and CEO of Charge+Zone and Bluehill. So Charge+Zone is one of the country's fastest growing EV charging networks. So it's building high-speed public charging infrastructure and has raised 54 million in its Series A. Next we have Rajinder. So Rajinder is the MD of Matrix Partners India. So I'm sure most of us know Matrix here. Matrix has over 100 investments with $1.5 billion AUM. So Rajinder handles a portfolio of consumer B2B and fintech companies at Matrix Partners. So some of these include Ola, Park Plus, Dukan Auto, and many more. Next we have Chaitanya. So Chaitanya is the Associate Director of E-Mobility at WRI India. So she's led various research and project on electric mobility initiatives at the national and state levels. So she oversees government EV partnerships in 6 Indian states and has co-authored Niti Aayog book on charging infrastructure implementation. And we have our moderator, Mr. Manu Iyer. He's the founder and managing partner of Bluehill Capital. So Bluehill Capital is an early stage fund backing innovative ideas in deep tech, IoT, industrial and the clean tech space. So it has a portfolio of about 20 companies, and they invest in the ranges of 100 to 500K for each company. So please give a warm welcome to the panelists and the moderator. We can begin the session now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. And how is everyone today? Morning. Good to see, so many people out on a Saturday morning here. So the title says the role of government, in accelerating EV adoption. I think there's a lot to unpack there, as innocuous as that title looks. I think there's a lot to unpack, and I think we have the perfect mix of people to have this conversation with. So let's kick things off with Amitabh. So, government regulation, I think the most talked about, and I think the most infamous policy, is FAME, right? The faster adoption. So it expires in March 24. I think there is a lot of nuances around it. And so I will ask you to address that policy as it concerns you specifically in the three-wheeler segment, and then Kartikey can also chime in on that.
Sure. So FAME is the faster, the adoption and manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicles. It was as a policy. It was started, in 2010 or something, and then they barely did anything in the first phase. The second phase was started in 2019, expires in 2024, 31st March 2024. So a couple of things that I am a little challenged about is, first of all, we had earmarked 10,000 crores. We spent about 3,000 crores, and we're still unsure if we will consider this policy or extend this policy at all. Everyone says that it will get extended, but there's no announcement for it. I have a challenge there. I don't think there is ever a precedent in any other country where 3 years, 4 years, 5 years of subsidies have really made a difference. That's number one. Number two, my bigger challenge is when I talk to the government. A lot of them talk about FAME being extended in different shapes and forms, but there's no announcement yet. When FAME is announced, an extension or a FAME 3 policy is announced, everything related to EVs will need to be recertified for FAME 3, recertified, everything. Not just vehicles, battery packs, everything. And it takes months to do that. We're already sitting in December. 31st March, things expire. Every vehicle ever to be sold in this country or being sold in this country or being manufactured in this country has to go through that process if it needs any kind of subsidy. Again, there'll be queues. The same thing that happened for battery packs last year is probably going to get replicated this year. I think it's high time that they were cognizant of these things, and whichever way it is, yes or no, but I think better to announce it so that manufacturers, OEMs like us, we can at least start making those decisions. We can start working with the financing side. So if subsidy is not there, what do you do? How do you make sure that people still accept it because they like vehicles? It's not because of the price, but they like vehicles. And so there's a lot that can be done without the subsidy. And I'm not saying it should continue indefinitely. It can be tapered down. There are ways in which it can happen. But it's important to set those stakes in the ground and say, this is it, guys. This is how it's going to be going forward, whether there's going to be a mix, a new one, an extension, whatever it is. I think the announcement is all I'm waiting for, just to make sure that it's happening.
Awesome. So, Kartikey, as it pertains to you, right, and your charging network and fast charging network, can you talk about how the FAME itself would, what are the issues that you would see with that?
I think it's a little deja vu feeling because when we started Charge+Zone in early 2019 and there were general elections, and FAME 2 was released just before general elections, and we were one of the industry representatives being consulted for the charging infra point of view. Now, honestly, the word subsidy is very, very dangerous. We know what has happened to the agriculture sector in the country over the last 50 years. I think viability gap funding is a better term to use. Right? But when we as EV charging company were in discussions, we were told that there are various strings around the charging infra. You got to install a two-wheeler charger, three-wheeler, all type of chargers. And we honestly walked out. We said that we don't need a subsidy because in business, nobody likes uncertainties. As Amitabh said, I think I can just imagine rather, he and his team going through a pain of what business plan will we make now, for the next 3 years when there are uncertainties around FAME 2, recertification, FAME. So for us, we took a bold call on focusing on high-speed charging infrastructure for 4 years. Our business model is that we invest, we build a charging infra, and we sell electrons and not molecules. So we are the gas station of the future. And having said that, we are also a firm believer that there needs to be this VGF or viability gap funding as an option given to the industry across the board. Two-wheeler, three-wheeler have been the max to benefit, but private electric buses or the future electric trucks can also be part of this scheme. So very clear, let's say a clarity from the relevant government stakeholders will certainly help. And VGF maybe for the next 2 years or 3 years until we see the cost of production of these vehicles, especially batteries, they come to a reasonable bankable levels. I think that's where the VGF can be tapered down. But at the end of the day, personally what I would rather say and share is, please remove uncertainties.
Right.
Either you give it, you don't give it, or whatever it is, be certain of what we want to do. And that's the message to the government.
Super. Rajinder, I'm going to skip you for 1 second and then I'll come back. So Chaitanya, there are a host of policies, guidelines, there is obviously FAME, there's the e-Amrit portal, Atmanirbhar, PLI. What needs to be done, on a more holistic basis to improve the idea of localization in this ecosystem, right? To build self-sufficiency. How do you think through that as a policy think tank?
Thank you. Thanks, Manu, for the question. I think I'll start off where Amitabh and Kartikey left off, which is that the way we lay out policy roadmaps in our country is not necessarily long-term enough. Policy roadmaps are actually good. When they do come out, they are good and there is a decent amount of support that's given. So FAME totally is now, I think, just over 10,000 crores was allocated. How well it was planned for disbursement, how the enforcing and supporting mechanisms came up to ensure that it is used up, could still be improved. On the supply side as well, I think 18,000 crores for the advanced chemistry cell PLI, another 26,000 crore for the auto PLI, advanced auto PLI. So there are investments, public investments that are being announced to catalyze and accelerate the ecosystem. But is this being announced in advance enough? Is this de-risking the ecosystem from a signaling point of view? Is, I think, where the weakness is. So if industry needs to invest today for a certain amount of projected targeted demand tomorrow, they need to have that clarity today for 2030. We've been talking about 2030 since 2015. We're getting closer to 2030, and yet a lot of the policy support that will be present in 2030 is still not clear today. And one area where that becomes paramount, where our clean energy transition itself sort of comes to be at stake, is maybe in this whole critical mineral supply chain. Just maybe a week ago, I think the government of India, one of the headline items has been that the government of India has auctioned out 20 blocks of critical minerals for mining. A mining timeline is 10 to 15 years. Like, is 15 years from the time a mine is discovered, potential deposits are discovered. It will take 16 years for a mine to become operational. Now, our and why are critical minerals important? They sort of underpin the whole clean energy transition. So an electric car, for example, actually uses 6 times the critical minerals that a regular car uses. So as we are moving away from fossil fuels or hydrocarbon based energy, we're moving towards mineral and rare earth supported energy, mostly where they are required in our battery systems, in our motors and various parts, both for renewable energy and electric mobility. So with this, so I wanted to touch upon this because this really illustrates the role of government policy, and the fact that if we have timelines like these 15-20 years, we really needed to have started a while ago. Like maybe in 2018, 2019, we started with the Khanij Bidesh India Limited, Kabil, was a sort of institution that was set up under the Ministry of Mines to source strategic investments in other countries. We haven't made a lot of progress in that. While we know that China controls a large part of the production and processing supply chain for critical minerals, India is still very, very nascent in that, on that front. So the kind of signals that need to go out so that investors actually invest today for the future will need to be done so that you don't have critical minerals be a bottleneck in the future. Where the demand is there but the supply is not there because you don't have that supply chain in place. Supply chain shocks can lead to sort of the rise in prices. We saw how lithium-ion battery prices went up again in the middle and are now tapering off again. So, and with India, a large part of our clean energy transition has been the energy security aspect, and we don't necessarily want to move from one sort of energy dependence to another sort of energy import dependence. So the role of government policy is really to lay out that clear roadmap and to start de-risking the ecosystem, be it from a material substitution point of view to find more localized indigenous materials, be it from a recycling point of view to ensure that some of that supply can be catered to by recycling and reusing the minerals that are already in the batteries there today, and to actually have that stability of the supply chain through mining investments in country as well as strategic partnerships with other countries. So that needs to happen, and I think that's where it becomes very clear.
Awesome. So I think clarity, is required in policy. I mean, as obvious as that sounds. Rajinder, so I don't know if the audience knows. So Matrix and Rajinder were the first investors in Ola Electric. So I think they have a perspective. I think that very few do. And you have Park Plus, you have O2 on the financing side as well. So could you, briefly talk about Matrix's thesis in EV, first of all?
Sure. So first of all, thank you, and to the entrepreneurs in the room. I think building in this sector is incredibly challenging, and so kudos to everyone who's working in this space. The First and foremost thesis when we backed Ola Electric was honestly the founder. It was a special relationship. We had known the founder through his previous company. There were clear insights from Ola and EV and ride sharing from the multiple pilots that they had done. So it was frankly a very easy investment for us to make. But in terms of choices, I think the US EV ecosystem developed very differently from the China EV ecosystem. US, if you look at it, there are a few companies. Most of them are full stack. They kind of build vertically. They own battery, they own vendor ecosystem, they own components. And in a few cases, of course, they work with external partners. In China, it's developed as a much broader EV ecosystem, where you have multiple different players in each part of the value chain, and there are enough competitors. And Tarun was bringing out this point that, just in motors, for example, there might be 450 companies, right? Whereas in India, there might be only a few. So I think when we were making the investment, the first question we asked ourselves was, which way will India likely go? Will it be more like the US in terms of vertical integration, or will it be more like China? And one choice was really around, how will government policy play out in this space? And it seemed to us that the only certainty in terms of government policy is that subsidies will end. We don't know when, or viability gap funding will end. We don't know when. And so whatever business gets built will have to plan for that end and basically be a cost leader as well as an innovation leader from the get-go. And if you have to be a cost leader from the get-go, then you have to build at scale. And so obviously, again, the entrepreneurs that you back are slightly different. They think of the business from day one at scale, and Bhavish is absolutely one of those. So two-wheeler, largest market, 20 plus million units. Two-wheeler, largest factory in the world from day one. That was always part of the plan. Vertical integration, cell manufacturing, in-house, R&D, in-house from the get-go. And then if I go to the other pieces of the bomb and how much of that is planned to be in-sourced and how much of it has already happened, that I'm sure he wouldn't want us to disclose. But most of it on day one was very clear in his mind. And we are privileged to be in partnership with such founders. I think it's challenging to build in this industry. I agree with Tarun and others that I suspect India will have somewhere in the middle, neither the US nor China. But if we end up thinking that it will be like China, where there will be hundreds of companies that succeed, I think we're fooling ourselves. I think it'll be a fewer, smaller set. And the entrepreneurs that do break out and build large companies, I think will be very, very large. Because Indian companies in this sector, I think, do have the potential to go global as well.
Got it. I'm just going to continue, pull a little deeper on that thread with you. Is government policy a go, no-go decision for you, right? As you're sitting in the IC meetings, right? Are you thinking, is that, like an overwhelming thing that influences decision, or are you like, it will be figured out eventually? We can't really go wrong on this, something as critical as an EV investment, or in general is government policy outside of EV as well? Is that something that affects the way you invest?
Yes. So I think any investor who tells you otherwise, is wrong. Regulation in India is core to our economy. Whether you think of fintech, whether you think of EVs, whether you think of e-commerce, whether you think of gaming, every single industry in India is regulated. Whether there is a regulation or not, it's regulated. And the regulation will always be grey. And you never know whether you're on which side of the line, on whether it's grey or whatever it is, right? So there's no real answer on how do we factor this in. The one thing you can do as an investor, and certainly as an entrepreneur as well, is have regulatory thinking built into the company from day one. So, for example, in certain industries, it's much easier for us to work with entrepreneurs who have experienced regulation before they start the company. Maybe they experienced it in the previous company that they built. Maybe they were at a large bank. Maybe they were at a large manufacturing company. But they have firsthand understood how to navigate and understand regulation. It may not be needed in the next social media app, but trust me, once that social media app becomes large enough, you will absolutely need it. So build that muscle in early. Don't externalize. Government is part of our life, so it is what it is.
Got it. Super. Amitabh, so I'm going to, as you think about increased EV adoption, right? A core part of that is going to come from financing. Right? You guys are investors in auto, but I think there has to be a more fundamental ground up financing that needs to happen, right? how are you thinking about it? How are you seeing? How would you like that sector to pan out? I think that's the easiest in your segment, right? Which is commercial three-wheelers.
Yeah, so it's weird. This is an industry there India manufactures about 1.3 million three-wheelers every year. That's all, and it's been happening for a while. So demand side, no issue. The strange part is that most of the manufacturers had to build their own financing arms. If you think about it, Bajaj Finance and Mahindra Finance and all that. It's largely because, for whatever reason, three-wheeler industry was not considered to be one of those industries which, any NBFC or commercial bank really wanted to, venture out and invest for whatever reason. It's largely been an ad hoc kind of investment that used to happen either through the dealer or through agents who would help you in the process. Interest rates were as high as 30 to 32%. This is for a person who is buying a vehicle for his livelihood. 1.3 million every year are manufactured in this country. That's the status, right? Now come EVs, it's been very, very difficult. We are, of course, not just selling three-wheelers. We're also kind of evangelists for the three-wheeler auto rickshaw driver to a certain extent, and that shows in the corporate identity and the dealerships that we've created and all that. But at the end of the day, we're trying to see how we can make sure that, first of all, financing is available in better terms. If it's that same CIBIL score that is going to be tracked, and poor guy, he bought a gas cylinder or a gas stove and he missed out on one of the payments, so CIBIL score ki lag gayi. So, dude can't even buy a three-wheeler from that perspective. So we are trying to make sure that we work with financiers. It's not been easy, but we have 19 of them on board now, including the likes of Sundaram Finance and Shriram Finance. And that has all happened because of data. So EVs, the advantage of EVs is each component, not just the entire vehicle with GPS data, but each component is spitting out data. And that data can be used to determine not just how much the vehicle is driving or where the vehicle is, and then the innovations that we have, even if you turn off the vehicle, you can identify where it is. It gives a certain confidence to the financier. And that's the reason why some of these people are now stepping forward. It's not just the new age fintech companies that are doing this, but also the traditional guys, because this is the first time they are able to see ki the gaadi hai kahan. Once you make an investment in diesel, how do you know where the vehicle is? Most of these guys never show up in a dealership to get their vehicles serviced either, right? It's all roadside. So there's a big change that's happening. The way we had to address it was by seeding it. Few financiers seed a few vehicles. They get used to it. They like the fact that they can see data. They don't like to repo vehicles, but they can actually go to the driver and say ki yaar kam chalaya hai, what's the problem, can we figure out something for you and all that. So that's worked out. We've been able to bring the interest rates all the way up to 18%, which is really good. Our hope is that through the convincing that we are doing, hopefully commercial banks will start showing up. That's when the interest really comes down. The sad part is in the B2B side, when there are firms buying auto rickshaws, whether cargo or passenger, then you get loans at 8, 9, 10%, even today. And the poor guy who's buying it for his livelihood, he's getting it at 28%. Matlab, yeah, so that's where we are on this, and I'm hoping that more and more people get access to this data, get used to it, and that's why.
When FAME2 was announced and implementation began, why government did not nudge RBI make it a priority sectoral angle. Right. We have seen that in renewable energy 10 years ago, 12 years ago. We are seeing all these gigawatt of installations. It was actually one important thing that happened in 2014 when RBI classified renewable energy as a priority lending sector. Right. And that's the reason banks started opening up the wallets to various industrial groups to begin with. Also, there were various individual entrepreneurs who set up solar or wind farms and so on and so forth. So that lack of coherence, yeah, or a consistent thinking is what I think we should all be worried about.
Got it.
That's
That makes sense, and I'll just continue on that. So one of the policy issues that affect you is discoms, right? So I mean, I know certain states have maybe Delhi or but how are you thinking through as you expand your charging network, discom policy, having to work with so many disparate entities and coordinating with them about areas that they don't fully understand? Is that how are you thinking through that, and how is it affecting your rollout?
Now, fortunately, before we started Charge+Zone, we were building up renewable energy plants, and dealing with regulators was part and parcel of our business then and even today. And we actually fought some of the cases. We won some, we lost. Not that we want to fight. It is because the electricity sector, or power sector, is dominated by state regulators. Electricity is not the subject of the center. Electricity is a subject of every state in this country. So that's a starting point. The second part is we realized that we got to deal with discom hands down, and every day we'll have to deal with them. Actually, I'm also a certified electrical contractor. That's the only time I found my degree in electrical engineering useful, rather. Yeah. But when we started off setting up charging station, it was very clear that there will be upstream integration that we'll have to do. We'll have to set up power infra for every charging station, and we walked into this with a very open mind. And in 2019 we started off. Today with 20,000 kilometers of highway electrified, we are in Bangalore right now, and Bangalore is the city with largest presence that we have for more than 100 plus supercharging stations. 9 hubs that we built in Chandapura, in Yelahanka and all. And they're all done ground up greenfield projects. Having said that, yes, discom is a major challenge because they are all led by government owned entities. Very few cities in India have private discoms. That is one part. The second part is what we need from discom is only the agility or the speed. So just another example, we are setting one Hyundai charging station here close by, and Bescom server went down just 1 week ago. And for last 1 week, entire Bangalore's applications for new electricity connections are not happening. After a lot of nudging, I said, "Hey, server ke pehle to manually karte the na hum log, to kar lijiye." So after a lot of discussion, finally the chief electrical engineer nudged, saying that okay, chalo manually kar lo abhi, right? And so what I'm saying, this is one example. There are numerous such examples of discoms in the country. But at the end of the day, I think one thing is clear, that we have a significant large grid in the country. Yeah, people do ask ki bijli kam hai. I mean, the first question I was asked by one of early stage investor that India does not have electricity. I said no, there is a correction to be done. India is electrified. Yeah, is that we are not able to distribute it well because generation far exceeds distribution in this country. And what we need to bring is more agility and efficiency into the system.
Actually, question for both of you. Is there a likelihood that discoms will be privatized in the next government?
Yeah, so good question, Rajinder. In fact, before Charge+Zone, I was actually planning to get into a discom business. Yeah. And government or some of the state government in India have started discom franchises. So one of the last discom that has got privatized is one in Bhubaneswar in Odisha, where Tata Power is taken over. So this particular question also reminds me of a famous statement by Prime Minister Modi ji when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, that the business of government is not to win business, and power sector requires a huge overhaul, like one nation, one tax. Same thing, we need one nation, one grid kind of thing, and at the same time, if not all, but if let's say top 50 cities in India have private discoms, I think life will be a lot better.
I mean, I'll only add very briefly to that. I think it'll take a long time. There is going to be some coexistence in Bombay and Delhi. We do see private discoms operating, but given the whole legacy and structure of our state level discoms and everything, it is going to definitely take time. So it's not an immediate bet by any means. So yeah.
Super. So Chaitanya, I think we briefly spoke about this. EV policy is, I think, today largely driven as a carrot, based policy, right? And the question was, should it be driven more by stick as well, right? And so, how much can be mandated? How much can be enforced? Is that practically possible?
Before I come to that, because whenever we talk about regulation, hackles are raised that is the ecosystem ready? You can't regulate and mandate things without ensuring that the enablers are in place, because then you're just setting up the private sector to fail, or whoever is participating to fail. So just before I come to the regulation question, again, what Kartikey said about electricity, power being a state subject, most of the components under that comprise the EV ecosystem are state subjects. Urban transport is a state subject. Electricity is a state subject. Urban development, where you're looking at building bylaws for allowing charging points in buildings, that's a state subject. A lot has been over the past few years slowly done at the center. States are now taking on the mantle of promoting the EV ecosystem, moving it forward. As an example, actually, if you count all the subsidies for electric vehicles and charging infrastructure that all Indian states and union territories are providing, that works out to something like 7,000 crores, which they plan to disperse over a 5 to 7 year period maybe. And that is similar to almost in scale to fame. So at the state level, there is a lot being, again, envisioned, allocated, but there is that gap between policy and implementation. And it is a big gap at the state level, state and local levels. And that is where you're seeing this sort of lack of capacity of discoms. It is where you're seeing lack of capacity of state transit undertakings, although some of them are getting better at managing electric buses. That's where you're looking at municipal corporations and what they understand to be their role in building out the EV charging ecosystem. They don't think they have much of a role. Or when they're sitting on land which is needed for charging infrastructure, they are wondering why they should give it at a concessional rate, because there's more money to be made. Cities like Bombay, they're like, every square inch of real estate is so expensive, how can we give some away concessionally for charging? It's an actual problem. But again, I think building that capacity at the state and local levels is going to be critical to actually translate the policies that are being made to create that enabling ecosystem on ground. Because when we're talking about regulation, the kind of regulation that is currently being discussed are maybe mandates on sales or purchases. So recently, Delhi very recently just released a aggregator policy where they've said that all companies that are running electric vehicle like fleets or for various services, passenger transport services, e-commerce services, any sort of delivery services, they need to have an electrification plan where they have to hit certain targets and electrify their fleet. So that is a purchase mandate where you're asking the operators to actually have certain targets, and you're mandating that those targets need to be enforced. There's also something called a sales mandate, and here maybe Amitabh, you could come in on whether that would be a good thing or not. There are examples of states like California, countries like China, and even the European Union, which have used different sort of instruments to ensure that manufacturers themselves are manufacturing a share of their vehicles as EVs. So you're saying, instead of organically growing the size of your EV manufacturing, if there are certain targets that companies have to meet, then there is some evidence to show that the EV ecosystem will evolve faster. Because rather than a demand-driven approach, this is a supply-driven approach. And when there's a supply-driven approach, costs will come down faster, investments will happen faster. But again, you need to ensure that all the pieces are in place, the supply chains are in place, on-ground infrastructure is in place before you mandate that to the private sector. So regulations are a way of so far it's been a very subsidy-driven market where you're trying to stimulate demand by providing subsidies. Now subsidies are not going to last forever. So how does the phase out of subsidies, how can it coincide with the regulatory framework? And again, this needs to come in well in advance, because for companies, we've seen the BS4 to BS6 transition. It completely upended companies' plans because it happened within 3 years. We can't have the same thing repeat for the EV ecosystem as well. So it needs to be a plan out in advance, and that means it needs to start, the discussion on it needs to start happening today, even if the targets don't need to be starting to be set today. So it becomes important on that front.
Super. Coming back to Rajinder, right? I think the previous discussion, I think Tarun asked Shailesh about investing in hardware, right? And I think the comment was that people would invest if there were large outcomes, right? As a VC, you're chasing that large outcome. I think Ola Electric is a large outcome. If not, I don't know your portfolio, but I'm assuming one of the larger ones, right? So clearly there are opportunities. So why do you think more people are not investing in hardware? What needs to change? How are you thinking about that?
So I think hardware overall, like the history of investing in India is very new. So you don't have, I will confess, there isn't necessarily enough talent at every level. Even on the investing side and definitely on the entrepreneurial side as well, there is certainly a gap in terms of talent. I think Tarun was also saying that at the managerial level, when you think about manufacturing engineering, there is a lack of talent there as well. So as an ecosystem, we are still relatively early. How do we bootstrap and get out of this situation, right? The reality is India's industry is 15% of GDP. China is like 35-40%. So it's a national priority. The country wants to solve it. All of us are clear that the policy top-down seems to be that 15% needs to go to 25-30%. The government's willing to put money to work to make it happen. There are PLIs, there are subsidies in different sectors. So it's a no-brainer. It has to happen, and therefore there is an opportunity for investors as well in this story. Now, where will people more likely play? See, there are PLIs in industries like, I don't know, toy manufacturing, etc. Now, is there enough IP in toy manufacturing? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not going to, say something conclusive there. But is there more IP and more R&D know-how in automobiles as a sector? Absolutely. And if you look at OEM plays on the EV side, even if you look at component plays within the BOM of each of the manufacturers that, either Tarun or, others in the ecosystem, everyone's trying to solve for how do you lower BOM and at the same time improve product quality. So there are large markets. The India market alone may not be large enough for some of these plays. You might have to look at global markets. But are investors looking at this? Absolutely. Is the entrepreneur archetype the same as the archetype that we backed a decade ago? Definitely not. You see a lot more people who have spent 10-15 years who have enough grey hair and have some scars on their back and feathers in their cap, all of that. So we're seeing more. We will likely do more, and government incentives will act as leverage on whatever capital that we put to work, and it will become a VC investable sector overall.
Great. I'm being given signals to. I just have one question to end with, and for everyone, if we can quickly do that. So we're saying there are gaps on the garment side, right? What does the industry need to do? What is the gap from the industry standpoint? Are we doing enough? Is there enough depth in the industry? Is there enough interest? Are we, proving to be a large outcome as an industry that, there is interest from the government side as well? So quickly, I think, before we take a question or two.
Yeah, just a few seconds on this. So I think it's clear to everyone across India, across the world, that EVs are here to stay. Technologies might change, a few things might happen here and there, but they are going to be here. Whatever can be done to promote that adoption. And I'm not saying just in the form of subsidy. I know that that's going to go away. That's not the point. But something that is consistent, across the board, that's what we need from a government policy perspective. EVs are going to be around. I think there's enough and more innovation that's happening. I mean, we're a startup, 11th year. 32 global patents have been granted to us. So that's fundamental R&D that's been happening in this company for a long time, and there are others also who are doing that. So it's not just us. So I'm saying that there's a lot of work that's going on in this domain, and I think more and more you'll start seeing happen, including in batteries and chemicals and all kinds of things. So yeah, it's here to stay.
Awesome. Kartikey.
I think the train has left the station. It's clear that e-mobility is here to stay and it will grow. I was meeting Gadkariji recently and I said before it becomes a national emergency, can this be made a national priority, the adoption of e-mobility? And the stats are very simple. If 30% of the vehicles are electric, and I'm only talking about four-wheelers and three-wheelers, let's not keep two-wheelers aside, it will save $126 billion recurring every year on crude oil imports. That will support our education and healthcare budget of the country for a number of years. So it's pretty clear that while government has done their bit, yes, I must admit one thing, that the industry need to step up now. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, government's job is to roll out the red carpet, the policy. All I am saying is that there need to be a proper coherence. That's all we need. But yes, I think industry need to really step up the game now, and because there are tons of really thousands of consumers waiting for the right EV product options to be given, financing and so on, and they are really willing to adopt it.
Super. Rajinder, as it pertains to your funnel actually.
So just I think industry should play within the bounds of regulation. I think there have been lots of companies that have been playing around regulations, and it hurts everyone in the industry who's playing within the bounds of regulation.
Super. Chaitanya.
Yeah, I think industry is doing quite a bit already, but just one thing is more on the R&D side, and that needs to also come from government in terms of a push, and the top players are doing that. There's also a lot of smaller players that are coming up, that are mushrooming, looking at the ecosystem. That's not necessarily going to be a long-term sustainable outlook. If you see things like the e-rickshaw sector and all, there's only a few players that are actually doing quality products. So I think that focus on quality will become very crucial to ensure that transition happens, because quality and cost, how can you balance that to ensure that the transition happens for the consumer?
Great. Thank you so much. We'll take a quick audience question or two if there is one.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Just a second. Thank you very much. Great discussion. I know government also is doing its best, but thing is there are so many mixed signals also coming in the papers. They sometimes talk about ethanol, sometimes talk about hydrogen, and it's confusing for the customer also. Like, will EV is really going to stay, or ethanol is going to come, or hydrogen is coming? I mean, Toyota is coming with green cars and all that. So your point of view on that, like, what is going to stick around for the next 5-10 years? I don't know.
I think they would take offense to the.
No, perfect.
No, I'm just.
The alternate fuels is here to stay. It's very clear. Yeah. And other than diesel and petrol, I think we have EVs, we have biofuels, ethanol, and so on. Yes, I think that could be one think tank, and we have Chaitanya here from WRI. Maybe she can lead this entire exercise to give a clarity largely to the industry, in general, and the market in general, that what trends where and how. But at the same time, we as a consumer are pretty much used to this, right? We had CNG,
Correct.
yeah, and when CNG came, then we say, okay, CNG will take over petrol. It never happened. Yeah. But it's clear that alternative fuel options is now the order of the state.
Just to add 2 points to that. One is, I think it will be use case led, number one. Different use cases are going to see the economics work out for different alternative fuels. Definitely towards the cleaner fuel ecosystem, but which use case will go with which fuel is something that will still remain to be seen. And secondly, where you're seeing quicker uptake, therefore, is the commercial vehicle space, where you have faster cycles. Like, the vehicles are going to be used up in 5 to 7 years, and so they know that it's not a long-term bet. I think it's more for the private sector, like for individuals to transition. That clarity will be helpful, because we've seen that with diesel only being limited to 10 years and all, there's been a massive shift away from diesels income consumers. So they don't want that to happen with EV, and that might be part of their hesitation. So that clarity definitely needs to come, especially for the individual consumers.
Big round of applause for this awesome panel over here. Thank you, Amitabh and Kartikey, Rajinder. Thank you, Chaitanya and Manu, for coming all the way. Really appreciate this. Fantastic. Some of them have actually flown in from outside the city and some of them outside the country as well. So give big round of applause, guys. One more time. Thank you.